Welcome, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's reading of the Advent of Divine Justice. In this section, we'll be covering paragraphs 74 through 80. The teaching campaign, inaugurated throughout the states of the North American Republic and the Dominion of Canada, acquires therefore an importance and is invested with an urgency that cannot be overestimated. Launched on its course through the creative energies released by the will of Abdu'l-Baha, and sweeping across the Western Hemisphere through the propelling force which it is generating, it must, I feel, be carried out in conformity with certain principles designed to ensure its efficient conduct and to hasten the attainment of its objective. Those who participate in such a campaign, whether in an organizing capacity or as workers to whose care the execution of the task itself has been committed, must, as an essential preliminary to the discharge of their duties, thoroughly familiarize themselves with the various aspects of the history and teachings of their faith. In their efforts to achieve this purpose, they must study for themselves, conscientiously and painstakingly, the literature of their faith, delve into its teachings, assimilate its laws and principles, ponder its admonitions, tenets, and purposes, commit to memory certain of its exhortations and prayers, master the essentials of its administration, and keep abreast of its current affairs and latest developments. They must strive to obtain from sources that are authoritative and unbiased a sound knowledge of the history and tenets of Islam, the source and background of their faith, and approach reverently and with a mind purged from preconceived ideas the study of the Quran, which, apart from the sacred scriptures of the Babi and Baha'i revelations, constitutes the only book which can be regarded as an absolutely authenticated repository of the Word of God. They must devote special attention to the investigation of those institutions and circumstances that are directly connected with the origin and birth of their faith, with the station claimed by its forerunner, and with the laws revealed by its author. Having acquired in their essentials these prerequisites of success in the teaching field, they must, whenever they contemplate undertaking any specific mission in the countries of Latin America, endeavor, whenever feasible, to acquire a certain proficiency in the languages spoken by the inhabitants of those countries, and the knowledge of their customs, habits, and outlook. The teachers going to those parts, Abdu'l-Baha, referring in one of the tablets of the Divine Plan to the Central American republics, has written, must also be familiar with the Spanish language. A party speaking their languages, he in another tablet has written, must turn their faces to and travel through the three great island groups of the Pacific Ocean. The teachers traveling in different directions, he further states, must know the language of the country in which they will enter. For example, a person being proficient in the Japanese language may travel to Japan, or a person knowing the Chinese language may hasten to China, and so forth. No participator in this inter-American campaign of teaching must feel that the initiative for any particular activity connected with this work must rest solely with those agencies, whether assemblies or committees, whose special concern is to promote and facilitate the attainment of this vital objective of the 7-year plan. It is the bounden duty of every American believer, as the faithful trustee of Abdu'l-Baha's Divine Plan, to initiate, promote, and consolidate within the limits fixed by the administrative principles of the faith any activity he or she deems fit to undertake for the furtherance of the plan. Neither the threatening world situation nor any consideration of lack of material resources, of mental equipment, of knowledge, or of experience, desirable as they are, should deter any prospective pioneer teacher from arising independently and from setting in motion the forces which Abdu'l-Baha has repeatedly assured us will, once released, attract even as a magnet the promised and infallible aid of Baha'u'llah. Let him not wait for any directions or expect any special encouragement from the elected representatives of his community, nor be deterred by any obstacles which his relatives or fellow citizens may be inclined to place in his path, nor mind the censure of his critics or enemies. Be unrestrained as the wind, is Baha'u'llah's counsel to every would-be teacher of his cause, while carrying the message of him who hath caused the dawn of divine guidance to break. Consider how the wind, faithful to that which God hath ordained, bloweth upon all regions of the earth, be they inhabited or desolate. Neither the sight of desolation nor the evidences of prosperity can either pain or please it. It bloweth in every direction as bidden by its Creator. And when he determineth to leave his home for the sake of the cause of his Lord, Baha'u'llah in another passage, referring to such a teacher, has revealed, let him put his whole trust in God as the best provision for his journey, and array himself with the robe of virtue, if he be kindled with the fire of his love. If he forgoeth all created things, the words he uttereth shall set on fire them that hear him. Having on his own initiative, and undaunted by any hindrances with which either friend or foe may, unwittingly or deliberately obstruct his path, resolved to arise and respond to the call of teaching, let him carefully consider every avenue of approach which he might utilize in his personal attempts to capture the attention, maintain the interest, and deepen the faith of those whom he seeks to bring into the fold of his faith. Let him survey the possibilities which the particular circumstances in which he lives offer him, evaluate their advantages, and proceed intelligently and systematically to utilize them for the achievement of the object he has in mind. Let him also attempt to devise such methods as association with clubs, exhibitions and societies, lectures on subjects akin to the teachings and ideals of his cause, such as temperance, morality, social welfare, religious and racial tolerance, economic cooperation, Islam and comparative religion, or participation in social, cultural, humanitarian, charitable and educational organizations and enterprises, which, while safeguarding the integrity of his faith, will open up to him a multitude of ways and means whereby he can enlist successively the sympathy, the support, and ultimately the allegiance of those with whom he comes in contact. Let him, while such contacts are being made, bear in mind the claims which his faith is constantly making upon him to preserve its dignity and station, to safeguard the integrity of its laws and principles, to demonstrate its comprehensiveness and universality, and to defend fearlessly its manifold and vital interests. Let him consider the degree of his hearers' receptivity and decide for himself the suitability of either the direct or indirect method of teaching, whereby he can impress upon the seeker the vital importance of the divine message and persuade him to throw in his lot with those who have already embraced it. Let him remember the example set by Abdu'l-Baha and his constant admonition to shower such kindness upon the seeker and exemplify to such a degree the spirit of the teachings he hopes to instill into him, that the recipient will be spontaneously impelled to identify himself with the cause embodying such teachings. Let him refrain at the outset from insisting on such laws and observances as might impose too severe a strain on the seeker's newly awakened faith, and endeavor to nurse him patiently, tactfully, and yet determinedly into full maturity, and aid him to proclaim his unqualified acceptance of whatever has been ordained by Baha'u'llah. Let him, as soon as that stage has been attained, introduce him to the body of his fellow believers, and seek through constant fellowship and active participation in the local activities of his community to enable him to contribute his share to the enrichment of its life, the furtherance of its tasks, the consolidations of its interests, and the coordination of its activities with those of its sister communities. Let him not be content until he has infused into his spiritual child so deep a longing as to impel him to arise independently in his turn and devote his energies to the quickening of other souls and the upholding of the laws and principles laid down by his newly adopted faith. Let every participator in the continent-wide campaign initiated by the American believers, and particularly those engaged in pioneer work in virgin territories, bear in mind the necessity of keeping in close and constant touch with those responsible agencies designed to direct, coordinate, and facilitate the teaching activities of the entire community, whether it be the body of their elected national representatives or its chief auxiliary institution, the National Teaching Committee, or its subsidiary organs, the regional teaching committees, or the local spiritual assemblies, and their respective teaching committees. They who labor for the spread of the cause of Baha'u'llah should, through constant interchange of ideas, through letters, circulars, reports, bulletins, and other means of communication with these established instruments designed for the propagation of the faith, ensure the smooth and speedy functioning of the teaching machinery of their administrative order. Confusion, delay, duplication of efforts, dissipation of energy will thereby be completely avoided, and the mighty flood of the grace of Baha'u'llah, flowing abundantly and without the least obstruction through these essential channels, will so inundate the hearts and souls of men as to enable them to bring forth the harvest repeatedly predicted by Abdu'l-Baha. Upon every participator in this concerted effort, unprecedented in the annals of the American Baha'i community, rests the spiritual obligation to make of the mandate of teaching so vitally binding upon all the all-pervading concern of his life. In his daily activities and contacts, in all his journeys, whether for business or otherwise, on his holidays and outings, and on any mission he may be called upon to undertake, every bearer of the message of Baha'u'llah should consider it not only an obligation, but a privilege to scatter far and wide the seeds of his faith, and to rest content in the abiding knowledge that whatever be the immediate response to that message, and however inadequate the vehicle that conveyed it, the power of its author will, as he sees fit, enable those seeds to germinate, and in circumstances which no one can foresee enrich the harvest which the labor of his followers will gather. If he be member of any spiritual assembly, let him encourage his assembly to consecrate a certain part of its time at each of its sessions to the earnest and prayerful consideration of such ways and means as may foster the campaign of teaching, or may furnish whatever resources are available for its progress, extension, and consolidation. If he attends his summer school, and everyone without exception is urged to take advantage of attending it, let him consider such an occasion as a welcome and precious opportunity so to enrich, through lectures, study, and discussion, his knowledge of the fundamentals of his faith as to be able to transmit with greater confidence and effectiveness the message that has been entrusted to his care. Let him, moreover, seek, whenever feasible, through inter-community visits to stimulate the zeal for teaching and to demonstrate to outsiders the zest and alertness of the promoters of his cause and the organic unity of its institutions.